Melanie. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video, we are going to make your first quilt. Super excited about this little series where I think we're going to do 4 videos, but we'll see. This will be video number 1, and we are going to make your first quilt together. All right, so this is kind of what it looks like. Patchwork made with a charm pack. Okay, so we're going to take one of those daunting steps right out of your first quilt and use a pre-cut. That will allow us to just get right to sewing. So that's what we're going to do for this first video. We're going to get this top sewn together. Your first quilt. It's going to be super fun. And then I'm going to show you how to baste it and quilt it and bind it and all that good stuff. But I'm going to walk you through really slow. So this is going to be a series meant for those of you that have always wanted to learn how to make a quilt. And so this is going to be like absolute beginner. I'm going to go super slow. I also wanted to tell you guys about my 5 Days to Better Quilting free mini class. So this is a little mini class I've offered for a long time, but in case you haven't seen it, it's called 5 Days to Better Quilting. So that's the number 5, daysquilting.com. And I've had this available for a while. I just went back in and made sure that all the videos are working and all the emails look good. It has so much information, and I still regularly get emails from people letting me know how much they enjoyed the little class and how much they learned from it. So if you're a beginner quilter, that is also a great resource for you guys. I have lots of like the list of good fabric manufacturers and tools that you might want to invest in and all kinds of things. So definitely check that out. Again, the number 5, daysquilting.com. But let's jump right in. I've got a nice beginner tutorial for you. Let's make your first quilt. Hey everyone, so today's video is going to be how to make your very first quilt. So I'm going to walk you through all the steps, and my biggest recommendation when you're making your very first quilt is to start with the charm pack. So we are going to be making a basic patchwork small quilt, nothing too unmanageable. So I want you to find a charm pack, and charm packs are 5-inch squares, and they're already pre-cut for you in the entire line of fabric. So there's lots of them to choose from. I'm going to actually be using this one from the fabric line Catterday. So that's what it's going to look like. But any other charm pack that you would like to use, pick one out. They should have about 42 pieces in there. They're all about the same size. So find one of these, and then we will head over to the sewing machine. So actually, before we head to the sewing machine, we want to do our layout. So we want to take this apart and find a dining table, a floor, a clean surface of some kind to lay out your fabric. So play around with your layout, and as long as you have 42 squares in your charm pack, I want you to arrange it so that you have 6 squares across and 7 squares going down. So go ahead and get your layout figured out, and then we're gonna organize everything and head over to the sewing machine. The great thing about the charm packs is that they're pre-cut for you, so that takes a whole step out. So when you're very first getting into quilting, it's a great start. Okay, so here's my layout. I just did this on the floor of my sewing room, so you don't need anything super fancy. Now I'm going to show you how to organize your stacks of fabric. That way you can take everything over to the sewing machine and you won't have to keep getting up and down. The first thing that you want to do though is take a picture, because inevitably my cat comes along and knocks over a stack or something happens, and this way you'll just have a backup plan so that you can refer to it in case you need to. This also helps you sort of determine if you want to change anything in your placement. For example, you know, I'm okay with this, but this is a little bit of a solid block down here. I maybe would want to move some things around. So you can kind of check it out that way. All right, so this is how I like to organize my stacks. And if you find a different way of doing it that works better for you, feel free to do that instead. So what I like to do is take 2 columns at a time. So I place right sides together. So right side on top of the right side. And then I stack from the top going down. So then I will know that I need to sew along this right edge, and that this is the top fabric of columns 1 and 2. So then what I'll do is I'll go and do the same thing on the other 4 columns. and I'll stack them and label them. That way we can head to the sewing machine and not have to worry about getting things misplaced. We don't have to get up and down. Everything is there. We could just zoom through and get everything sewn. All right, now here we go. We've got our 3 stacks. I labeled them, column 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. So we're going to put 3, 4, 5, and 6 aside for now. And here's column 1 and 2. Now I'm going to teach you a technique called chain piecing, and this is a lifesaver when it comes to quilting. And it makes it go really fast, very efficient. You don't use up too much thread, so it's great. You can use a thread that is whatever you like. I use Aurifil, and I like a kind of soft dove gray like this, especially when I'm using lots of different colors from my fabric line. So if you're using all very light colors, you could use white, or all very dark colors, just something that coordinates with everything. So the way chain piecing works is you're going to grab your first 2 pieces of fabric. Remember, everything should be the right direction. We know we need to sew down the right side. We are going to line up our edges, and we're going to measure our 1/4 inch seam. So everything with quilting is 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to measure that from the edge of our fabric. So if you have a pinked edge, this little zigzag edge is called a pinked edge, and if you have that, we're going to measure that 1/4 inch from the outside of that, not from the inside of that zigzag. So I'm going to place this underneath my presser foot. Don't worry, I will get a close-up. And I'm going to use a piecing foot, but many of you as a beginner quilter may not have a piecing foot for your sewing machine. And a piecing foot just means that it's already a perfect 1/4 inch. So I'm going to show you how to use your plates that comes on your sewing machine. So right down here on this plate, this says 1-4. It's right there. You'll see it on your machine. And I'm going to line up my edges with that line. So there's no need to backstitch with piecing quilting. And then we will sew that through. Now, don't cut your threads. We're just going to press on that presser foot and get a few extra stitches. And then we're going to grab the next 2 fabrics from our pile. Line up those edges, lift up that presser foot, and then we are going to continue sewing. Now, occasionally pre-cuts are not cut perfectly, and so that's okay. We are going to kind of watch out for that in our next step. But if you see some edges that aren't quite lining up, don't stress out. And you're going to just keep doing this chain piecing with all of your fabrics until you get to the end of your 2 columns. And I'll meet you there. All right, I've just finished my last one. Now we can lift up our presser foot, take it off the machine, and use your thread cutter or whatever you have to cut that thread. So now I have one of these little guys that helps me cut everything, but just regular old scissors will work just fine. So I'm gonna go through, and just remember that you need to keep the last one you did is one that goes on the bottom, because the first fabric you fed through the machine was from the top of the quilt. So as we go down, that way we can stay nice and organized. And you always know that the seam is on the right hand side in case you got confused. So here is my stack, and I'm going to put my label back on there just in case. And you know, sometimes I even like to pin it because my little cat Jack, he's a little feisty one sometimes. So I'm going to put this aside. And now I'm going to follow that exact same method for the remaining stacks of fabric that I have. And of course, if you wanted to use 2 charm packs or 3 charm packs to make a nice big quilt, totally fine. I'm just encouraging you to keep it small for your beginning of quilting journey. So go ahead and finish row 3 and 4, or column 3 and 4, excuse me, and column 5 and 6, and then we will get to our rows. All right, so now we have all 3 piles done and ready to go, and now we can start putting our rows together. And the cool thing about this method is that you don't even need to get up from your sewing machine. We can just stay put right here. Sorry if you hear that piano in the background, my son is practicing. So we have the top stack. Okay, so here's our top stack. We're going to move that over here. We have our next one, and then we have our third. Okay, so while we're sitting here, just go ahead and create these rows. So I'm going to leave The third one here, I'm going to place my right sides together from the first set and the second set. And then we will send this through the machine. Then I'm going to go ahead and cut that one. I'm going to open it back up, and then I'm going to add the set from the third stack to the end. Right sides together, line up those edges, and send that through the machine. So now we've got row one, not column one. Row one complete. So what I do is I just set this aside. My work table is right behind me. So I put this on my work table, and that is the top one from the quilt, right? So then, and we're gonna work our way down. So then the top of that stack that I'm making of all the rows will be from the bottom of the quilt. So all that to say, just keep track of which is the top one, which is the bottom one, and if you need to refer to your photo, totally fine. So now I'll take the next ones. So now sew all of these together and keep doing that until you have all 7 of your rows complete. All right, so here we have all of our rows now are complete with our bottom row here on the top. So just keep track of that. So what we need to do now is we're going to put our rows together. So we're going to have the bottom row here, and then we need the next row. And then I'm just going to stack the rest of these up and out of the way. Okay, so we want all of the seams from the bottom row going in one direction, whether that's to the left or to the right, doesn't matter. You can do this at the ironing board if that helps you, but I want to show you how, I feel like as a beginner, there's so many steps to quilting, so I'm trying to minimize the steps and have you feel confident about what you're doing. So all of the seams need to be facing, let's say, to the left. Okay, so that means this seam underneath where our connections are, they need to be to the left. And so you can just do a little finger press. Just kind of gently run your fingers along those seams. And I want to just kind of teach you this concept. This is called nesting your seams. And then what happens is the next row up here, all of these are going to be facing to the right. Okay, so I'm going to finger press these as well to the right. And what that does, when the bottom is to the left and the top is to the right, you have the seams lock into place when you sew them together. And that makes it so that you get those nice, perfect corners, those perfect little patchwork corners. Okay, so we did a little finger press. You can do this at the ironing board if you want, but I don't. I just sit at my machine and do it. Our seams going opposite directions. And that's good. We like that because that seam will lock into place. And you'll get that nice perfect corner. So what I recommend for beginners is pin all of these intersections until you get the hang of it. So I've got those seams nice and locked together. So I'm going to add a pin. And then I'm going to go down. And same thing, I'm going to kind of wiggle. You can kind of wiggle it in your fingers and feel that seam, they're butt right up next to each other. We'll slide a little pin in there. And then go to the next one. So now that that's done, we can send this through the sewing machine. When you get close to the seam going through the needle, take your pin out and hold your fingers right where it was and slowly send it through. Don't run over those pins with your sewing machine. Don't want anybody sending a broken needle into their eyeball. Sometimes as you run it through, the underneath seam kind of flips back toward yourself. So just make sure everything's laying flat. All right, let's see how we did. So that's how you want your points to look. That is what nesting the seam does. Helps you get those nice corners. And if you did not get that nice corner, that is okay. Please do not rip it out. As long as your stitch is good and your fabric is connecting, keep going. Because there's nothing worse as a beginner than feeling discouraged and having to rip all your stuff out. No one will notice in the end, I promise. So now what you'll do is same idea. So if all of these from the top row, the seams are facing to the right, so that means our next row, the seams are going to be the opposite direction, so we can lock in those seams together and nest them. So make sure we get those nice points, and that's all there is to it to continue putting your entire quilt top together. So once your quilt top is sewn, all completely sewn, I'll meet you at the ironing board, and that is when we're going to give this a nice good press. All right, so here's our little quilt top ready to be pressed. I've got my iron on. Now what we're going to do, we're going to flip it over to the back and we're going to give it a nice good press. There's two ways of doing this. You can iron your seam open, which basically would mean to split this open like so, and you would iron along there. I don't think it's necessary when we just have these standard seams. When you get to more complicated things like stars, where you have a lot of fabric kind of bulking up these seams, then I think that's a great way of doing it, but I'm gonna do it to one side. It's also a little faster than ironing it open, but there is two ways of doing it, so I do want you to be aware of that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my iron and I'm gonna press it down, and I'm gonna press down all of these seams as well. And when you press in quilting, you want to press and lift, press and lift. We don't want to run the iron along the fabric and distort anything. And we also don't want to use steam. So a dry iron is usually better. A little steam is okay if you need it, if it's super wrinkled. So I'm going to press the seam down, and I'm going to do that for all those row seams. And as I'm moving it along, I'm lifting it slightly. Hold it in place, lift slightly, I'm lifting it up, and then I'm pressing it back down. That way we'll have nice pressed seams, and we can go to our next step. But once you do that, you'll have this adorable little quilt top that we literally made so fast. I mean, look how easy that was, right? I hope you felt like it was easy. All right, what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this video. I'm so excited for you guys. Let me know how it's going. If you're a beginner quilter, let me know if you have any questions. Did I leave something out? Are you unsure about something? I would love to know and love to be able to help you out. So leave comments down below. All of the fabric that I use, different resources, great blog posts that might be helpful, all of that can be found in the description box below the video. So this is going to be video number 1. I will also, once those videos come out, I will have down below linked videos 2, 3, and 4 for your basting, quilting, and binding. So all of that will be available for you guys as well. So stay tuned for video number 2 and let me know how your first quilt goes. Tag me on social media, send me photos. I love to see what you all are working on, and I love to see how you take my projects and make them your own. I want to see, what charm pack did you pick out? What was speaking to you at the fabric store or on those photos as you were looking at them online? Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.